After more than 2 decades on federal death row, Christopher Andre Vialva was executed by lethal injection at the U.S. penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. But to understand how he ended up there, we have to return to a hot summer afternoon in 1999, outside a gas station in Texas. Todd and Stacie Bagley were Christian youth pastors from Iowa. Gentle, humble people who never hesitated to help strangers. They lived simply, no television, just prayer, peace, and purpose. On June 20, 1999, they were in Texas for a short-term Christian mission, visiting old friends and their former church near Fort Hood, where Todd had once been stationed. That afternoon, the couple pulled into a gas station. What they didn't know was that 5 teenage boys had already set a plan in motion. 19-year-old Christopher Vialva, along with 17-year-old Christopher Lewis and 16-year-old Tony Sparks, had been talking about how to get quick money. Their idea was simple: lure someone into giving them a ride, pull out a gun, force the victims into the trunk, steal the car, and disappear. By the following day, they had added 2 more friends to the plan: Brandon Bernard, who had just turned 18, and 17-year-old Terry Brown. The 5 piled into a car and began circling parking lots in search of a target. They started at a supermarket but came up empty. So they kept driving, weaving through convenience store lots, until they spotted a man at a pay phone outside a gas station in Killeen, Texas. His name was Todd Bagley. Inside the car sat his wife, Stacie. The couple was about to walk directly into the trap. Up until that day, life had been steady for Todd and Stacie. Todd had felt God calling him into ministry, so they had packed up their lives and moved back into the home where Todd grew up. But that June, they were back in Texas, attending a revival at their old church and reconnecting with friends. On Sunday, June 20th, after a morning service and lunch, they stopped for gas. Todd stepped out to make a quick phone call while Stacie waited in the car. That's when the teens approached, asking for a ride to their uncle's house. True to his nature, Todd agreed. He told them to hop in. For a moment, everything seemed normal. But minutes later, Christopher Vialva pulled out a Glock pistol and aimed it at Todd. "The plans have changed," he announced. At the same time, Tony Sparks pointed a smaller gun at Stacie. The teens forced the couple to stop the car, robbed them of wallets, jewelry, and bank cards, then shoved them into the trunk. From there, the nightmare stretched on for hours. Vialva drove across town, stopping at different ATMs to try to withdraw cash. But the Bagleys didn't have much money, less than $100. The teens used it to buy food at Wendy's. At one point, Vialva stopped for cigars and cigarettes, carrying on as though it were just another day. Meanwhile, in the pitch-black trunk, Todd and Stacie sat together, terrified, suffocating, and praying. Remarkably, they didn't scream or beg. Instead, they spoke softly about God, grace, and forgiveness. At one point, Tony Sparks told Christopher he didn't want to be part of it anymore. He said the plan had gone too far. But Christopher wouldn't back down. He argued that the Bagleys had seen their faces, that they were witnesses, and witnesses couldn't be allowed to live. He then made his intentions chillingly clear: the couple had to die. Afterward, he would burn the car to erase any trace of what happened. Determined, Vialva drove to his own house, where he ran inside to grab a ski mask and a change of clothes. Tony walked away at that point, distancing himself. But Christopher pressed forward. He met up with Brandon Bernard and Terry Brown, explaining that the Bagleys would have to be killed. Neither Brandon nor Terry resisted. They simply agreed and picked up lighter fluid and a lighter. The group then drove to the Belton Lake Recreation Area, a remote spot near Fort Hood. Vialva parked on a quiet hill, and Brandon and Terry began dousing the car with lighter fluid. Inside the trunk, Todd and Stacie were still alive. Stacie's muffled final words were, "Jesus loves you. Jesus, take care of us." Then Vialva opened the trunk. He shot Todd in the head, killing him instantly. He turned the gun on Stacie, shooting her in the face. She was knocked unconscious but still breathing. Seconds later, Brandon Bernard set the car on fire. Thick smoke filled the vehicle, and Stacie died from smoke inhalation. The teens fled but didn't make it far. Their getaway car became stuck in the mud nearby. As fire crews responded to the smoke, police caught the group down the road and arrested them. Because the murders took place on federal property, the case went to federal court. Christopher Lewis and Terry Brown, both 17, accepted plea deals. They each received 248 months, just over 20 years, in federal prison. Lewis was released in June 2017 and Brown in January 2020. Tony Sparks, only 16, refused a deal. Even though he wasn't at the actual murders, he was still deeply involved. He was sentenced to life without parole. In 2018, his sentence was reduced to 35 years. He is scheduled for possible release in April 2030. Christopher Vialva and Brandon Bernard went to trial in 2000. The jury heard how Vialva pulled the trigger and Bernard lit the fire. On June 13, they returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Christopher received the death penalty for carjacking and for both murders, plus life in prison for conspiracy. Brandon was also sentenced to death for his role in Stacie Bagley's death, with life sentences for the other charges. Both men spent 20 years on death row, filing appeal after appeal. Brandon Bernard was executed in December 2020. Before his death, he looked toward the witness room and said quietly, "I'm sorry." Christopher Vialva's lawyers argued that the jury in his case had been all white and that his troubled upbringing and mental health struggles were never fully considered. He had suffered physical and emotional abuse, abandonment, and racial rejection. As a teenager, he turned to gangs to find belonging. But none of it outweighed the crime. In prison, Christopher converted to Messianic Judaism. He mentored other inmates and, in a recorded statement, confessed, "I committed a grave wrong when I was a lost kid. I took 2 precious lives from this world. Every day I wish I could right this wrong." But in 2020, the federal government resumed executions after a 17-year pause. Vialva was among the first to face it. On September 24, 2020, at the age of 40, Christopher Vialva was executed. For his final meal, he requested Pizza Hut. In his last words, he prayed for Todd and Stacie Bagley's family. As the lethal injection began, he looked toward his mother in the viewing room. His head tilted toward her, and moments later, he was still. He was pronounced dead at 6:46 p.m. The crime left scars that will never heal. Yet the Bagleys' final words spoke of forgiveness. "Jesus loves you." This case is more than just another tragedy. It's about choices and the irreversible cost of a single moment. 2 lives stolen. 2 families are shattered. And 5 teenagers who destroyed their futures before they even discovered who they might have become. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, subscribe to my channel for daily crime cases.